President Donald Trump survives an assassination attempt, Joe Biden has quit the race, and Vice President Kamala Harris is most likely to be nominated at the forthcoming Democrat convention. Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu speaks before the United States Congress before Israel eliminates 3 key terrorists. Welcome to Inside Israel News, your home for American conservative commentary on world affairs and thorough and unbiased analysis of Israeli news, politics, and current events in the Middle East. Or as the internet trolls say, mouthpiece of the Zionist conspiracy, spokesman for the elders of Zion, highly paid propagandist of the Mossad. Yeah, no. This is Inside Israel News. I'm your host, Isaac Kight. Welcome back, Insiders. It is I, your gregarious Vulcan, your mad genius, your prophet of things to come, your shadow president. Back again, unbelievable since the last episode. It's been a couple of weeks now. Oh my God, I don't even know where to start. Everything has changed. Absolutely everything has changed. Just, off the top of my head, we had the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, his choice of J.D. Vance for VP running mate, which, as I said, prophet of things to come, I thought was most likely. I didn't predict it precisely, but I did say it was most likely, didn't I? I talked about it. You knew about it because you're insiders. You don't wait for the headlines. You listen to Inside Israel News, so you know ahead of time. Although obviously none of us could have predicted the assassination attempt. Oy, Gewalt. And then Joe Biden dropped out of the race, and Kamala Harris has been installed as the Democrat candidate. We've had 3 major terrorists assassinated. Ismail Haniyeh, oh, thank God. Now it was an awful man if ever there was one, and no loss there, and good riddance. And also for shocker, the number 2 in Hezbollah, who was also responsible for blowing up U.S. Marines in Beirut back in the Reagan administration. And the head is this guy, Mohammad Reza Zahed, this guy, the head of the IRGC in Syria, also whacked. So Israel brought a major blow to 3 of Iran's proxies in one fell swoop, right? More on that in a bit. Obviously, I'll go in depth. And then there were the Venezuelan elections, and everything's going nuts in Venezuela because now it looks like the opposition has won, and Maduro has been ousted, and he's trying to pretend that he won, and no one's buying it. So that could very well be it. That could be the end of Maduro. All of these things, all of it, so much to say today, I have to dive right in. I just don't have time, and I'm going to have to be quick. I can do a little bit more in-depth. I was going to do some more in-depth discussion of the European elections and stuff. I may do a little at the end of the episode, but I want to, keep the big picture. We're going to stick to the big picture today. Before I get to the big picture, I want to talk, speaking of the Trump assassination. Let's start there. That's where the note, the attempt to kill the former president. And the first thing I want to say about all of that, first of all, thank God Trump turned his head. People talking about the hand of God turning his head. No kidding. If you believe in luck, I guess you believe in luck. But none of us believe in coincidence, do we? We see divine intervention. We see providence. He was protected somehow. The bullet, injured his ear, blood on his face. I'm telling you this, with social media and everything, about everything so quickly. I finally got a chance to visit the hospital. Of course, as you guys know from the last episode, my baby girl is still in the NICU, almost a month after she was born. We're hoping in the next couple weeks we'll get her back, get her home and get settled in. But she still needs a little bit of medical attention. And so I was there holding her. I finally got a chance to hold her. Meanwhile, my kids are going nuts in the waiting room, so I can't hold her for long, unfortunately. It's a real pain. when you have a child in the hospital, as a parent, you feel really useless. I guess if you have any loved one, but I mean, in this case, I feel really useless. Like, there's not much I can do to make it all better for her, right? I can't just make it all go away. Anyway, I'm sitting there holding her, and we were just putting her back, and, I had a minute, pulled my phone out, and there's, posted 1 minute ago, this picture of Donald Trump with a bloody face and his fist in the air, right? And as I start looking and reading, there's been this assassination attempt. And within minutes, we had significant news about the event. So on the one hand, that was awesome. That with social media, and thanks to X and Elon Musk, who purchased X, we now have access to instant information, right? We don't have to wait for the CNN breaking headline or breaking news on Fox News, right? It's right there in front of us instantly. On the other hand, there's also a lot of false information. There were people reporting a second shooter. There were all kinds of things going on. As we piece together information about it later, of course, we have more detail. I'm going to start by talking about Corey Competor. Just an incredible story here. This man did not have to be a firefighter. He did not have to dedicate his life to protecting other people, right? We obviously we celebrate our vets and our law enforcement officers. First responders don't always get the attention that they should. EMTs, firefighters a little more than EMTs, but EMTs see a lot of nasty stuff, and I really, really feel for them. Obviously, they do a lot of great work. A couple of my friends are EMTs or have been in the past, and they tell stories like, delivering babies in the back of an ambulance, backed up to the hospital because they got there and it was time. There was no time to waste. Great people that do this. So this guy, Corey Competor, lived his life as a fireman and a fire chief, making this incredible contribution to his community, putting his life on the line, risking himself to protect others, and being a leader. He was a leader among men. He wasn't just a man. He was a man who was respected and looked up to by other men. Other men followed his orders. In that moment, and I've seen a number of videos happen there. There's 3 shots, bop, 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 like that, and then it seems the shooter takes a breath as he reloads, and then bop, 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 and then there's another breath, and then there's the 7th shot, which killed the shooter. That's how fast this happened. 5-6 seconds, right? In that time, without hesitation, without thought, Corey Competor flung himself on his loved ones to protect them from harm. We're in an era. I mean, I shouldn't even have to say this. We're in an era where we're talking about toxic masculinity and all. Men are bad, and everything about men is bad. That's incredible heroism, without hesitation. If he'd hesitated for a second, it might have been someone else who was killed. He took the bullet to protect his family. And that is, to say it's heroic is such an understatement at this point. That's what a man should be. It's what each of us should be. It's the kind of courage each of us wants to embody. And I just want to say, if I'm ever in a similar situation, I hope I'm half the man Corey Competor was. Because he was incredible. He did, exactly what he should. He was a hero right up to the last minute. And he died as he lived. He died a hero. Just an incredible man. Others were injured. Terrible, terrible thing that happened. Thank God, though, there was only the one life lost. Obviously, I'm not counting the life of the shooter, because the life of the shooter forfeited his life when he tried to take another, right? But Corey Competor, incredible. I was so glad to see it. I'll talk about the GOP convention in a bit. Trump bring out his equipment. Forgive my emotionalism. Here I am trying to be your gregarious Vulcan, and it's too much, He goes up and he kissed the helmet, and starting the speech with, I wasn't meant to be here, right? It was just an incredible moment, and the moment of silence for Corey. So, that's where that is, and that's heroism right there. And I'm just so grateful that the worst case scenario did not happen. All right, on the positive side of that, on the negative side, what the frack? The more I see about the Secret Service, I don't have words. Let's just say I don't have words for polite company. The words that I'd like to say to describe the Secret Service's job in protecting President Trump would be inappropriate to use here. Very appropriate as a sailor, aboard ship. Very appropriate if you hit your thumb with a hammer. Not appropriate here. Mein Gott. It's awful. They were in the building that the shooter was on top of instead of on the roof. Sloped roof. Most buildings do. So did the building they had their sniper on. And apparently it wasn't the Secret Service sniper who took out the killer. They told the local police just to chill. I mean, they didn't give them any instructions. Told them to be out there, and didn't have them really participating in the security arrangements and all that. I just apparently this kid was up there hours before checking out the roof. We've confirmed, or we seem to have confirmed. I mean, unless it is shown to be otherwise, I'll correct myself later. But it seems he was up on that roof. He's got a ladder, a gun. He's up on the roof with a rangefinder. He's on a roof 150 yards from the former president of the United States with a rangefinder. Now tell me, my friends, and I know some of you are veterans. Some of you have shooting experience, whatever. I was sitting with a Marine veteran friend of mine describing them like, you see a guy on a roof 150 yards from the former president with a rangefinder. What the heck could he be up to? Like, I'm going to be, all over that guy. You know what I'm saying? He's up there with a rangefinder. Like, let's go get that guy. Let's take him downtown. Let's have a chat. Just for having a rangefinder. Because, again, there's only one thing you would do with a rangefinder. Now, there'd be that theory, possibly, and I know law enforcement officers don't want to make, arses of themselves. And you take him downtown and find out, it's some kid playing around, or, he thought it was a magnifying glass or binoculars or something. There's always that possibility. But I'm going to say, 99 times out of 100, if you're on a roof 150 yards from the former president with a rangefinder, you are up to no good, as Jeff Foxworthy used to say. How did they not get this? So finally, the shooter's there with his rifle, all set, aiming at the president, and an officer pokes his head up on the roof. And apparently this Thomas Crooks pointed the gun at him. And so the officer, did what he should do, retreated and reported what was going on, called for backup, right? And if he dies, then maybe we'd hear a gunshot, but we wouldn't have we wouldn't have a report on what's going on and where. In any case, so, he got his 6 shots at Donald Trump. And one of them, as you've seen, I'm sure you've all seen the picture, that you can see the bullet whizzing toward the president's face. There is that. The history of political assassination in this country, I mean, it isn't funny. Abraham Lincoln, we'll never know what his Reconstruction policy was. Would James Garfield have gotten his reforms through against the machine politics of the Blainites and all the stuff going on in the GOP machine at the time? William McKinley, what would his second term have been like? Now, Teddy Roosevelt was an awesome president. He's an American hero for sure. But he could have run in 1904 and been elected to a proper term the right way, not succeeding by assassination. There's obviously the Kennedy assassination. I've actually been to the street where the X is still on the ground there in Dallas on the pavement. You can go and you can see it. That was a horrific moment for our country. Now, Kennedy wasn't doing that great. All things considered, he did a pretty good job in Cuba keeping missiles out without starting a war. But there were a lot of things not going right in his administration. It's not even clear he'd have had a second term. There might have been a Rockefeller presidency if he hadn't been assassinated. But we will never know. We won't find out because he was killed. And then his brother was killed. And, all the things happening. And the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, of course, is, our last major political assassination attempt on a president in the United States, was a horrific event. Ronald Reagan, Ronnie, Ronaldus Magnus, as Rush Limbaugh used to call him, had a great sense of humor about this stuff. You see the video where the balloon pops and he says, "Missed me," and he jokes about, the doctor comes to work on him and he says, "I hope you're a Republican," But that's the last time in my lifetime, at least, that we had this kind of thing happen. But there are consequences to words, right? All this stuff that we heard from the left for years about, we're going to fumigate Trump out of the White House. And Trump is literally Hitler. Maxine Waters, if you see, get a crowd and chase them out of the restaurant and all this kind of thing. You do this long enough and it's going to drive the Norman Nutters and the Nancy Nutters out there to do crazy things. And, we know this kid, Thomas Crooks, was screaming at, this video of him, screaming at the high school Republicans or whatever in his, telling them to die and kill themselves or something. I mean, just clearly unhinged. This is, loners, single parent family, we have a psychological sort of profile of this type of person. Now, we've had all kinds of conspiracy theories. I'm not fond of them. We do have the sort of macabre joke that, why wasn't the Secret Service on the roof? Well, why have the Secret Service and the CIA on the same roof? Kind of redundant, right? That's a bad joke, but it is a joke. But a friend of mine, shout out to Shannon, you know who you are. One of my friends, buddy was sitting there and he's like, we have that thought that runs through our head that maybe our government put him up to it. Maybe our government tried to assassinate Donald Trump. And that thought, like, why do we have that thought? Why is that niggling feeling and the suspicion in the back of our heads, right? We should never have this thought. This should not be something, it's unconscionable. It's not something we should ever think, but it's there. You have that thought running through your head, Now, I'm not going to go that far as to say. However, they put the less than the best agents on his security detail, and the security at this particular event certainly was not good. Another thought that apparently this Thomas Crooks had encrypted gaming messaging apps and this kind of thing, and was talking with different people overseas. The use of he had explosives in his car to use as a distraction to help him get away, things like that. Maybe he saw that kind of stuff in a movie, but it's entirely possible someone overseas put him up to it. And I'm not saying, the Chinese government or the Iranians or whatever deliberately, whatever. I'm not going to go that far, but, a deranged person in another country, perhaps. I don't know. In any case, this kid came up with a very sophisticated plan, and through the incompetence of the system, people trying, there's all these videos of people running around pointing at this guy and the police like, hey, there's this guy over there with a ladder and a gun. Hello. So, and we have the Secret Service agent who couldn't holster her gun, and I understand being agitated at a time like that. And so I'm going to give her a pass because it is an anxious moment in that kind of situation. But I don't know. I mean, when I say give her a pass, I mean, I'm not as critical as perhaps others might be. But I was in the service myself, and we had a couple of little emergencies that came up, and I remember other people around me reacting quickly. I remember my, reacting in accordance with my training and trying to stay calm. Now, afterwards, yeah, some of the guys would get the shakes a little bit, and sometimes we needed to take a few deep breaths and get ourselves pulled back together, especially the first time something happens, life-threatening or whatever, something catches fire. Sometimes people get a little, shaken by it. Shaken but not stirred. Okay, I've got to move on. I could go on about this forever, but what we have here is there was rank incompetence on the part of the Secret Service in providing security. That's not an opinion. I think at this point it's a clear fact, right? You have a roof 150 yards from the president that wasn't being watched, right? A kid got up on that roof. It's a video now where you can see him running around on the roof. It's a video from behind Trump looking at the shooter. I mean, it's ridiculous. In any case, let's move on to the implications. All right. So Trump hadn't named a successor at that point. He hadn't named a vice presidential nominee. So if that had been it, and he has a tendency to keep this stuff in his own head, what would have happened if Donald Trump had fallen that day, right? I mean, certainly we would all have been hurt and angry. he would be a martyr to the cause of America first and all that kind of stuff. And sounds great, but it's an awful way to be remembered. As a president gunned down, right? I don't even, I only want to go into it so far as to say that the shooter's timing, the point at which this took place, would have been really disastrous for the GOP. And it's been asked, the Goodfellas, they were making the comment, well, can you imagine what the mood of the GOP convention would have been? Thankfully, we didn't have to find out. But let's just take a moment to think about that. And, my God, that would have been a horrible thing. And then we get, people on the left, next time don't miss. And, they're being really petty. Number of, Washington staffers were fired. 3 or 4 that day. A number of professors have been let go. A professor in British Columbia was let go. There have been people who are suffering consequences for that attitude. And absolutely. I mean, I don't care who you are. I don't want Biden hurt. I don't want any of these people. I just talked about in the last episode how frustrating it is that, Joe Biden, being an old man, is dragged around running for president when he should be retired, right? It's elder abuse. We should have a sense of compassion for all people and respect their well-being. Don't want to see anyone hurt. So this was absolutely horrifying. So with that, I'm going to move on from the shooting because so much stuff has happened. Before the convention, of course, we heard that J.D. Vance was going to be the choice. And no surprise to me, no surprise to you. Hey, you guys had a pretty good, insight into that one, didn't you? Because you listened to the episode about it. Episode 121, I talked about that extensively. Like I said, insiders don't have to wait for the headlines. You guys have a pretty good idea what's happening, right? And you know what's up. Trump, didn't choose him to balance the ticket. Didn't to fill in any weaknesses of his, except perhaps the age. I mentioned the age issue. Trump is rather on the older side, and obviously J.D. Vance is 39. Right, he's turning 40 here in a few days, so he's going to be a very young vice president. And in 4 years, at this point, I would say, unless something happens to him or he resigns or there's a scandal or whatever, the 2028 Republican nomination is his to lose. Right, Trump will endorse him. It'll be up to him to run, obviously, and do all the things. But at this point, he can sail on to the nomination and take his shot at the presidency in 4 years. So there you go. But other than that, he doesn't really balance anything. He doesn't bring voters. There's no demographic that he represents. Yes, he's from a Rust Belt state, Ohio, so that might have some help in some ways with Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, kind of like I discussed. But the real thing here is that he's relatively new to Washington, but experienced in Washington. He's a vet and a business leader. He's tough. He was against Trump at first, but then came on board. I think Trump sees a lot of himself in J.D. Vance. I think he sees Vance as a potential leader, right? And I just want to say, Vance gave a great speech at the GOP convention. His wife, Usha, awesome, lovely lady. What a family. And I, for one, really identify with his story. Obviously, I was a victim of attempted murder and all kinds of other terrible abuse in my childhood, more serious than even anything J.D. Vance went through. But he went through something similar, a mother using drugs, being raised by a grandparent, struggling to find discipline and live a healthy life. And his is a story I can respect. And I think a lot of people in the working class can relate to coming from some kind of disadvantaged situation like that. And a lot of us these days just want to have, a normal family life. I just want to raise children and be a proud and happy father. I don't want to, I'm not asking too much, I think. Trying to reverse the negative trend. No more negative waves. So there we go. Great choice. Now Trump has a potential successor. The GOP has 12 years of the White House, in one ticket, and that's great opportunity right there. So Trump made a good choice, and I think that'll help him. Now the left responding that he's weird and he's got weird policies. That is such a funny way to go, right? I mean, he's there's. I think it's just because there's so little they can try to say about him that would stick, saying he's weird. And so we've had these great memes going all over X. If you follow Inside Israel News on X, you'll have a great time. I share a lot of funny stuff there. All these memes about, showing all these trans people around the White House and fruitcakes and what have you. And then, J.D. Vance is weird, right? It's J.D. Vance who's weird, really? Have you guys looked in the mirror lately? Bunch of freaks. Anyway, so there you are. Good choice for President Trump, and we'll have that. So GOP convention thoughts. It was a great convention. Donald Trump is a good showman, and he knows how to put on a party. And he really showed what the GOP can be. For a long time, we had our Christian conservative, we had our economic conservatives, we had our defense-minded folks and traditional values crowd and all these different demographics that are part of the GOP for one reason or another. But Donald Trump showed us what the big tent really can be. I mean, Amber Rose spoke. There were performances by rappers as well as country stars, right? The country stars you expect. The rappers, not so much. Amber Rose is not a conservative and not someone like conservatives, but she finds her own reasons to support Donald Trump. And, I'm all for it. Everyone is welcome to find their own reason to think that Donald Trump would be a better president than his opposition. And if that's their opinion, they're in the tent, right? It's a big tent. Also having, so many people spoke. There were so many great speeches. All of these comic things. You're gonna feel so blessed. You're going to be tired of being blessed. That was the best benediction I think I've ever heard. Couple of things. So Donald Trump did something different with this convention. He sat center of the audience looking on at the stage. Middle of the crowd, princeps, first citizen style. Now, people are going to take that, I think you're saying he's going to be a dictator. No, what I'm saying is, this is a positioning kind of like at the Colosseum, the first citizen or emperor, sitting in the middle of the crowd, being one of the crowd, trying to be one of the people, if you will. And there he is front and center. He's watching what's going on. Usually your nominees are all hiding in the back, right? In 2012, Mitt Romney came out at the end and gave a speech, right? John McCain came out and gave a speech, but they weren't there in the convention. Convention was run by other people, right? This kind of thing. Well, this way, Trump is front and center. He's there in the audience. He's watching all of the presentations until it's his turn to go up and speak. And that worked out really well, and people making fun of his bandage and all this kind of thing. Come on, people. Anyway, so... good presentation. Seeing Hulk Hogan up there. I mean, I used to watch WWF way back in the day. Andre the Giant was always my favorite, but Hulk Hogan, why not? Tears his shirt off and he's for Donald Trump. It's all good, right? But it was a great show, and there was a lot of energy, a lot of optimism, and you had a lot of different opinions there. Mike Pompeo gave an incredible speech talking about the world events and that kind of thing. A likely defense secretary, perhaps, or returning to the Secretary of State, someone who will be involved in the foreign relations on behalf of the Trump administration. Nikki Haley's speech was a little awkward. People booing at her, inappropriate, she ran against Trump, but she got up there to endorse Trump and be supportive. And she should have been respected for that. So I didn't appreciate that. Tucker Carlson had no business being up there. That's a tent a little too big. A guy who shares anti-Semitic narratives and, pro-Russian propaganda and is un-American is not a guy who should have been up there. Apparently, he's now the #1 podcast in the country. He's overtaken Joe Rogan. So I know who my competition is, right? To bring you guys rational, sane news without the bigotry and treason, right? Without spreading foreign propaganda and foreign narratives. Oy. So you're not gonna get any of Putin's propaganda here, or anything that Xi Jinping is gonna like. So, but again, it's a big tent. Everyone had their moment, right? You had lots of different speakers. There were a few really incredible moments I want to touch on. The families of the 13 veterans, the 13 servicemen and women who died in Afghanistan. That was incredible. I mean, that Biden, never, couldn't be bothered with them, looking at his watch, doesn't really want to be there. And Trump, spent time with them, threw a little party to try to cheer them up, and, honored the sacrifice of their children, their loved ones, for this country. A sacrifice in vain, because, the Biden administration had decided to tuck tail and run. Which should have, Biden should have resigned. So should have Harris. But, anyway, that should have been a resignation event right there. That loss was absolutely the worst, terrible defeat for the United States. At the time, as you recall, your shadow president, back in 2021, recorded an episode. I said, I didn't like it, but the fact is, the only way to bring peace to that region would be to send our troops back in and go knock the Taliban back on their arse. Right, go put them on the back foot and force them back to the negotiating table. But they wouldn't respect someone like Biden anyway. Trump, they respected. They didn't kill servicemen while Trump was in office, after a certain point. And, that's respect. But now they don't respect the current leadership. And why should they? Right? I mean, what has this administration done to earn anyone's respect? So that was really moving. And obviously the families of the hostages, including American hostages, still held in Gaza. That was an incredible presentation. And I just want to take a minute. Those two presentations, very heartfelt, incredible, not a dry eye in the building or at home. And, as you're watching that, just think, could the other side do the same thing? Would you ever see that at a Democrat Party convention? I just can't imagine it. And if it were, I just don't imagine it having the kind of feeling or them, being able to pull that off. I think that if they had parents of American Israeli hostages, American hostages held in Gaza, that you have a bunch of people waving Palestinian flags and shouting, slaughter the Jews, basically, it's the river to the sea and nonsense like that. I just can't see them pulling this off. Now, I do want to say, speaking of the big tent, and I was going to lead off with this, seeing Sean O'Brien, the president of the Teamsters, speak at the GOP convention was pretty incredible. On the one hand, unions, especially public sector unions, have been a problem in a lot of places. It's not that it's a problem for the workers to be organized. It's that they then interfere in the political situation. And pretty soon you have state and local governments that work for the unions and not for the people. Right? The voters have to be able to balance that out, right? And I'm not saying that means we should get rid of all the unions. I'm just saying that, if you have a situation where you have a private union and a private company and they go at each other, if they have problems, they can work those problems out to the benefit of the workers. And the workers are not going to let themselves be taken advantage of by either side. Hopefully. It happens. But, that's, humans are flawed beings, okay? Things happen. The point is, listening to his speech there was incredible. And it's incredible to see the Teamsters and other unions, since so many of their members are voting right, they're finally embracing the other political party. I mean, if you are an interest group, you should be interested in both parties. Like, you shouldn't just be for one side and promoting a one-sided agenda. So that was a big tent moment as well. And I have to say, he made you feel, proud to be a working man, or he might say, proud to be a working man. He was really great. Good speech and good presentation. So if you're a working class, average American, if you're African American, if you're Latino, if you're Indian, Asian American of any kind, there were lots of people there. Seeing Cal speak was just incredible. I hope he wins in Virginia. It's a long shot, but that was a really great speech that he gave. Any different group in America, you could connect to that convention and feel like a part of it, right? As a Yid, I feel like a part of it. There were plenty of Jewish speakers, and it was a really, it was an inclusive event, right? Truly diverse, right? And it's a diversity we don't feel with wokeness. So that's my thought on the convention. I have a lot more I could say. I'm not going to get in depth right now because I'm already, taking forever here. So that's that. All right. Next big thing. Oh my God. Joe Biden quits. Donald Trump defeated Joe Biden with a debate. Now that is, from a strategic point of view, incredible, right? I kind of got it wrong on this. I don't want to say I got it wrong. I wasn't as ahead of the curve as I could have been. See, I tell you guys when I'm not, I kept saying, pointing out they have to drag him across the finish line. Well, I still hold to that assertion. Joe Biden was their best chance at winning this election, right? He had the power of incumbency, even if the news is bad out there. He's still an incumbent president. He was their best shot. Without him, it's much more of a long shot. This is much more Donald Trump's election to lose. It's Donald's to lose now, right? Kind of thing. And with Harris, of all the candidates they could have shown, I can see why Obama might have been late to that party, why he endorsed late. She is not a competent candidate. And here's the thing. If she was all the great things that they try to say she is, she would have won the 2020 Democrat primary. She never polled in the double digits. She died, politically very early on. There was no energy behind her. And Joe Biden trounced her. She didn't win a single delegate. She quit before the primaries even began in 2020. So if she were truly the awesome candidate that they purport her to be, she wouldn't have to be installed as the nominee now, because she'd have already been there. First of all, if like a Nikki Haley or a Ted Cruz or some of the other, runner-up for nomination that we've had in recent years, if she had been in that kind of situation, you could say, hey, Biden had his one term. He's kind of old. Hey, I know Joe could run for another term. We'd be talking like last summer, right? 2020. I know Joe could run, but we got Kamala's so awesome. She's all these great things. We should run her. No one said that. In fact, everyone knew they had to drag Joe Biden across the finish line, just like I said. And I think, you get all these people, they were trying to cover it up and, the last minute they were going to make a switcheroo. I don't think anyone had that thought process. Maybe a few with better vision because, you could see it coming. Ted Cruz saw it coming. I have said my bit about it. I just think that Joe Biden was their best shot. Without Joe Biden, it's a much more difficult race. And that debate showed that Biden didn't have it. And, then there was the assassination attempt. It's possible Biden could have recovered had it not been for the assassination attempt. There's a headline in Europe, the bullet missed Trump and hit Biden, finished off his presidency, his candidacy, right, for a second term. I'm not agreeing with that headline. I'm just quoting it. It's, an interesting metaphor, interesting way of referring to all this. So there you go. No more Joe Biden. No more Joe. We're hearing, in terms of the rumors and what I get from people I know, I'm not going to say I'm the best connected in Washington. We're hearing a lot about the 25th Amendment. And for those of you who know how the 25th Amendment works, you need a majority of the cabinet to sign a document that the vice president has to sign. The vice president is the one key character in all that. The vice president has to sign that document declaring the president unfit for office, and then the vice president becomes acting president. And it seems that they threatened Joe with that, and Joe subsequently, pursuant to that, Joe went ahead and quit. He disappeared for several days before making his televised speech that was purportedly live but looks like it was pre-recorded. And there you go. And it's sad. It really is sad because he shouldn't be president even now. He was too old to run in 2020. They just didn't have any other candidates that they could drag across the finish line. So we've had this weekend at Bernie's presidency where Biden has been, not all there. And it's been so obvious that he's not the one running the show. He's not in charge. How many times have I said, Biden says this and the White House says that? Well, what is the White House? White House works for the president, right? The White House is the president. If the president's words are not policy, who's running the country? Well, if you don't like the way Biden's policies have been up till now, Harris is just a double down. Her positions on Israel are horrible. You can go out there and look. I'll talk about it more as we go on. She's helped fundraise for getting the Antifa people out of prison after they burned and looted and rioted and injured police officers in black neighborhoods, destroyed black neighborhoods. I mean, these horrible rioters, right? And she helped raise money to get them out of prison. She said that, the protests on the campus is against Israel, the neo-Nazi protests, the protesters calling for genocide against Jews. And, we have all these, keeping Jews off campus and doing, their shibboleth, right? They're doing the check and everything. You're not Jewish, are you? You're not for Israel, and this kind of thing. Terrorizing Jews on campus, all of that. And she says, that's how, emotion should be. And, that's what they should be doing. So it's like, she's married to a guy and people are like, she's married to a Jew in name only. I mean, the guy's a capo, is what we call it. Capos were, people who collaborated with the Nazis in the ghettos. It's really, in Jewish terms, this is the fighting words. I don't use that term lightly. I don't believe it's one that should be thrown around lightly because it'll lose its meaning if we give it to everyone, right? I mean, you can be a schloff any day of the week, right? Sometimes even I'm a schloff. Anyway, you can be a schloff any time of the week. You can, all these kinds of things. You can be mutnik, whatever. But when in the Jewish world, when you call someone a capo, that's, the worst thing you can say. It is the worst insult you can cast. I just have no patience for Jews who are traitors to their people, who aid and abet harm to other Jews. That doesn't fly with me. She's got a stepdaughter who's out fundraising for Hamas. Just wow. So where Kamala Harris is. The video I shared on X recently, interviews with Israelis. Walking down the street, this lady's asking 100 Israelis who they think is better for Israel, and 93 of them said Trump. 7 said Harris. Israel's a diverse country. There are 7 deluded people in Israel. So even people who didn't like Trump, they're like, well, I don't like Trump, but he'd be better for Israel. That's an honest take. Okay. Go into all of this stuff later, but that's the big thing. I still say, and like I said, I hold to my opinion that Biden was their best shot at winning. Now, the only thing they can do is try to make a whole bunch of noise, keep people from getting to know Kamala Harris, and try to wag the dog the election, right? And try to fake it till you make it, right? And that's the strategy they seem to have. And you look at the polls, they're ridiculous. We had right away, as soon as she was the candidate, we had polls that Trump had a lead in 18 to 24-year-olds, that Hispanics were tied. The traditional left-wing demographics were not favorable to her. 27% of African-American voters are now polling for Trump. Just about 70 for her, right? 27%. CNN was freaking out when 22% said they were going to vote for Trump. Now 27% are looking like they're going to vote for Trump. And that's bad news for Kamala. And she claims that she's black, but she's Indian and Jamaican. And it's like, Republicans in the House want the elected officials to stop talking about that. They don't want to make a big issue out of it. But it is kind of silly. You can't go out there and pretend to be what you're not, okay? It would be great to have a president of Indian descent. I have nothing against that. I'm not a fan of Vivek Ramaswamy, but he's a guy who could be competent, potentially, right? There are other people out there who, other Indian candidates, other people who could be, and you have, any number of possibilities, okay? There are lots of wonderful people out there who could be president from all kinds of different backgrounds. Jamaicans Jamaicans are perfectly fine people. Again, someone who's Jamaican could be president. That'd be great. But you can be Indian, you can be Jamaican, you can be both, but that doesn't make you black. And this whole thing where she's trying to be black is I don't see how that flies. Now, on the other hand, her prison policies in California, when African Americans find out about that in any kind of numbers, she deliberately extended people's stay in prison, who are being used for labor, right? And there's a big claim against her. She did it deliberately. I don't know that she did it deliberately. That I can't fact check, but I can say that it happened, right? So, this lady's a train wreck, and all the drug abuses, drug crimes that she prosecuted. Anyway, so nothing to see there. Last thought. Speaking of Vivek Ramaswamy, he has expressed an interest in running for J.D. Vance's seat in Ohio if Vance wins the presidency, or vice presidency. So if Trump wins, Vance becomes vice president, and then he vacates his Senate seat, which Ramaswamy could then be appointed to by the governor temporarily until the next election, until they would have an election in 2026 to fill the remainder of the vacant term, an expired term, which would end in 2026. So the term ends in 2028 because he was just elected in 22. So maybe. So Vivek would have to be on the ballot twice, he'd be in 26 and 28, but then he could get a full term. In any case, we'll see what happens. We'll see what goes there, and that might be an interesting thing. Again, Big Tent. I don't like Vivek's positions on a few things, especially in foreign policy, but again, we're a Big Tent. We have room for lots of voices. I'll be back here shortly with your Lippmann's logic and some interesting historical thoughts. And then I'll go into the break and lots of things on the Israeli news, including Bibi Netanyahu's speech before Congress. I should have mentioned that earlier. That was just an incredible speech. Great presentation, and I'm looking forward to talking about it here shortly. Brief Lippmann's logic today. Don't have a lot of time to talk about it. One of his books, Walter Lippmann, of course, Lippmann's Logic is the segment where I talk about Walter Lippmann, the proponent of liberal democracy at a time when it was most in jeopardy, most imperiled by, fascism, communism, all the isms out there, attacking this concept of liberal democracy. And honestly, liberal democracy did not perform at its best in the 20s and 30s. And that led to some, people thinking other systems might be better. Walter Lippmann did not. Walter Lippmann defended liberal democracy and the American system throughout. So, he's talking about we can't know everything or be informed about everything, right? And he had an interesting point that the most important power we have as citizens, as average people, is the question of to whom we listen, who we allow to influence us, right? We are influencers, right? So, even in his time, if you had a particular columnist that you liked at the newspaper, or if you had a particular writer that you liked, or political figure, allowing that person to influence you is one of your most important decisions. But we never really think about who do we allow to influence us, right? Who is that person that's influencing me? And so it was a very interesting and poignant point, and I just wanted to raise it because if you think about, there's all kinds of voices out there, including mine. Don't let me influence you beyond what's due, but by all means, if you like what you hear here, then and you appreciate it, then good. I'm glad to hear that you do. I don't expect everyone to agree with me, but what I tell you and the information that I give may influence you, right? Likewise, as Lippmann's pointing out, we all tend to give attention to different people and let them, drive an issue for us, right? And so it's a combination of who influences you and to whom you give respect and authority, right? In our system, theoretically, we elect the people to whom we give authority, okay? So before you give those people authority, on the issues, you were also influenced by a number of different people. And it's really important to think about who those people are, why you listen to them, and what influences you want to take from them. Because sometimes people will try to influence you otherwise. I mean, there are some great actors and sports players out there, and singers and whatever. And they may be great at that. They may do great charity. They may be great people. They may be horrible people, but they're not political experts, right? So when rock stars and whatever talk about politics, even if it's on my side, say Kid Rock spoke at the GOP convention, okay, but for what it's worth, right? But they're entertainers, right? Preferably, you want to be influenced by people who actually know something and have something constructive to contribute. And that's a point that Walter Lippmann made. And so, that as, juxtaposed with, say, Jacobinism, where it's like, well, it's those people that are bad. Just have to get rid of those people. Well, that's fine. But then who are you promoting? Who's going in instead of those people, right? And as I said, I mean, those people, and that always absolves you of all the responsibility, right? But if you're thinking about it, well, maybe I allowed myself to be influenced by someone I shouldn't have. That's an interesting thought. With that, that's your Lippmann logic, and we will go to the break. Visit the Inside Israel News store on Etsy to get your swag and support the show at the same time. You can get the Promised Land shirt or the Now You're Messing with the Son of a Mensch shirt or other interesting swag, phone cases, and such at the store. Go to Etsy, look up Inside Israel News, or you can go to the website, insideisrael.news, and click on the image of the store. Get your swag and show your support for Israel today.
Hello everybody, this is Eamon's Minute, where I tell you a cool fact from history. Today we'll be talking about the Battle of Litter Castle. The Battle of Litter Castle happened on May 5th, 1945, where a little Austrian village in Austria ended up having a castle which, when the Nazis took over, was turned into a prison, a Nazi prison castle, which ended up having French, British, and Austrian and Yugoslav prisoners. The Americans and Germans both came together to fight and take the castle. The castle was taken after reinforcements arrived, leading a good path to victory and taking over Germany. And that's Eamon's Minute. Back to you, Dad.
That Eamon's Minute is a fun thing to include in the show. My little guy, he likes to talk about history too. So now he has a platform to talk about it and share with you some interesting little stories that happen here and there. So it's a fun little project for him. Of course, he gets credit for it for school, and since we homeschool, we can do that kind of stuff. So with that, I wanted to mention something kind of fun for a minute in the middle of all this heavy content. I've been rereading my friend Bob Zeidman's book, Good Intentions, and I'd forgotten how funny it was. I went through it years ago, but it's a hoot. I mean, imagine a world where wokeness is taken to the logical conclusion, let's just say. He has all these gags in there about, trans fat is treated like a poison and it's a controlled substance by the government. And, parents hire kids, to play with their children, to be more diverse and this kind of thing. And they're illegal Canadians that are squatting in people's houses and stuff. It's just so much fun. And it's an interesting way of exploring all this kind of stuff. A little bit of that, so, the human nature and all of the silly ways in which this sort of Marxist wokeness is contrary to human nature. So Good Intentions by Bob Zeidman. Great read. I'm having a fun time reading it again. And it's been a few years, so, I vaguely recall the storyline, but hearing all the details again and all the gags, it's been a great time. I've been enjoying it. You might enjoy it too. You find it on Amazon. It's also available on Audible. So, Good Intentions by Bob Zeidman. So on Israeli news, I'll start with Bibi speaking before Congress. And I mean, if I had told you, right after the Republican convention, that Joe Biden would get 2 standing ovations from the United States Congress, I don't think you'd have believed me. But Bibi is suave enough that he was able to be gracious and talk about the areas where the Biden administration has been supportive of Israel. And that led to not 1, but 2 standing ovations before Congress, right, for the Biden administration's support for Israel to the degree that they have. And of course, he is also a good showman and understands the American political system very well. So he had with him in the gallery Elon Musk, among other people, though he wasn't, didn't give him a shout out or talk about him at all. But in any case, Musk was there. We had a standing ovation for Noah Argamani, the rescued hostage, for parents of American citizens who are still held hostage in Gaza, over 300 days later. Also, he had brought a soldier who is Ethiopian descent who ran a long distance to join the battle, and he's just an incredible and heroic story. Also received a standing ovation, and a Muslim soldier from Rahat. Now, Rahat is interesting. It's a Bedouin village in southern Israel. I visited Rahat, and that's where I talked with the Bedouins and discovered that a lot of them vote Likud, and they feel like Israel is the only country where they get justice in the Middle East. You can listen to past episodes where I talked about that. Don't really have time to go into it too far here. In any case, he received a standing ovation, and a standing ovation for Muslim soldiers serving in the IDF. And there's been a growing number of Arab Israelis who are choosing to serve. Now, they're not conscripted like most Jewish Israeli citizens are, so their service is voluntary. And it was great to have that. Bibi gave a great speech. He shared the KFC, chickens for KFC thing, which is, why the LGBTQ community is out protesting. Not all of them, obviously, but those who are involved in the Marxist agenda and all that. They're out protesting for the Palestinians, who throw gay people off of buildings. Who executed a member of Hamas who was caught engaging in homosexual activity not that many years ago. So it just, it's perplexing. Like, why do these people do this? Chickens for KFC, right? It's silly. But his bigger point, his larger point, and the point that sort of reminded me of Churchill's speech before Congress, which is a great listen if you want to go back and listen to that. But first listen to Bibi's speech in whole, in full. I listened to it live. That's the kind of thing I do. Anyway, this isn't just a battle between Israel and its enemies, right? These are the enemies of civilization. These are the enemies of America and Europe and the West at large, right? Et al. And their barbarity, their celebration. I mean, the point's been made by Neil Ferguson. Like, the Nazis tried to cover up what they had done, right? They, on some level, they understood that the Holocaust was wrong and that they should try to cover it up so that people would know about it, which obviously they failed at. But, Hamas was out sharing videos and celebrating the horrific things they did on October 7th. So Bibi is definitely right on that. Great speech and a great reminder to Congress that Israel is our closest ally. Very important thing to remind them of. 80% of Americans are pro-Israel. And something like 67% of Americans, for example, were saying that Israel should go into Rafah and finish the job. So, at least 2 in 3 Americans are staunchly pro-Israel. And there are a few others out there who are mostly pro-Israel. And then you've got, some people who don't know on one way or the other. And then you have the Norman Nutters and Nancy Nutters out there, your neo-Nazis who hate Jews, and because they hate Jews, or they've been roped into thinking that Jews are white and therefore, white bad. Back to that point I've made several times about anti-Semitism. Jews are always bad, right? To the communist, the Jew is a capitalist. To the capitalist, the Jew is a communist. To, if white is bad, we're white. Whatever's bad, that we're it. And if eating ice cream, if everyone decided that eating ice cream was bad tomorrow, Jews eat ice cream. I mean, whatever's bad, we're it. So, that's that crowd. In any case, Bibi reminded the Congress of Israel's close alliance with the U.S. and Israel's love of the United States. And it is true, being in Israel, seeing it, people just love America there. They always pointed me to the American products that they had, American exports, best, American, and they really like America. They love America. But also, that Americans generally support Israel. So Congress sometimes needs that reminder. And, if they want to remain, if members of Congress want to remain in Congress, it would be well for them to remember that and to respect the overwhelming popular support that Israel has in the United States. So that was a great speech. Of course, Rashida Tlaib showed it up with a sign that said "War Criminal." Very convenient for her to identify herself as such. People are joking. Members of Congress are identifying themselves as criminals. Tlaib with her, war criminal sign. Obviously, Kamala Harris didn't show up. Brief meeting with Bibi that seemed to be pretty awkward. Joe Biden declined to meet with Bibi altogether. And Bibi did go to Mar-a-Lago and meet with the Donald, right? And that was a good meeting, apparently. And when Bibi returned, he's been a lot more forward in prosecuting the war, as I'm about to speak to next. And I think that his conversation with Donald Trump might have aided him in that. I mean, we just have a few more months of Bibi. Either way, a few more months of Biden. Either way, Bibi should go out there and kick some butt, right? If Harris wins, Bibi's got a few more months here where he can really do some, make some effort to defend Israel and make sure that the Iranian proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas, cannot pose as serious a threat to Israel before, the dark times, before we'd have a deeply anti-Semitic administration. After all, Harris's stepdaughter is out, promoting Hamas publicly online, and her husband's a capo, right? Is one of these Jew in name only, real winner. This guy, impregnated the nanny, and anyway, I don't want to get into all that. Anyway, but obviously, if the Donald wins, then Israel will have a freer hand to act as it needs to for its defense and security. So there you go. In any case, so then we have this attack, and Bibi had to run back to Israel very expeditiously. Hezbollah lobbed another missile into Israel, into the Golan Heights, that hit a soccer field and killed 12 children. These are Druze children. Now the Druze are they're not quite Muslims. They're very similar, part of a Socratic group, but they are nevertheless native Middle Easterners, and they got hit with this missile, and Israel was horrified, and Israel responded to that provocation very much the way that it has to October 7th. So Israel values all of its citizens, right? Whereas obviously there is no love for the non-Jewish people in Israel on the part of Israel's enemies, because they continue to target them. In response, Israel was able to whack the number 2 in Hezbollah, Fouad Shakir, this guy that was involved in the Lebanon Marine Barracks bombing years ago. Good riddance to him. And also killed this guy, Zahid, this head of the IRGC in Syria, right? Part of the Syrian proxies, Iranian proxies in Syria. So those were a couple of excellent moves right there. Also, Mohammed Deif has also been taken out. So there's another major terrorist who's been whacked. But of course, the best news of all was that Ismail Haniyeh, the guy who has stolen billions of dollars in foreign aid to live a lavish billionaire lifestyle in Qatar, and the head of Hamas, the oppressor of the Palestinians, blown up in a guest house in Tehran. And this guy, good riddance to him. Not only is he someone who has caused much pain and suffering in Israel, he's also responsible for the oppression of the Palestinians, right? Curiously, he was favored to win the presidency if the Palestinians held elections. But that shows you, he causes all this oppression, yet people like him anyway. The Palestinians generally support this kind of thing. So that's part of the problem. That's why we need to de-radicalize the region, just like, the U.S. de-radicalized Germany and Japan after the Second World War, and to a lesser extent, Italy. So anyway, just, taking all that into account, excellent week for, bad guys have been biting the dust, and, unfortunately we lost some children. That's a terrible thing. But Israel has responded effectively, targeting Hezbollah and, what people call an escalation. See, it's never an escalation for Hezbollah to murder 12 children in Israel. It's always an escalation when Israel bombs southern Lebanon to destroy Hezbollah, bases and munition storage and rocket launchers and that kind of thing. That's an escalation. Assassinating terrorists who plan the murder of Israelis and Arabs alike and Druze, that's an escalation. But those people, committing acts of terrorism and murdering Israelis, that's not escalation. Because, Jewish life isn't worth much to the anti-Semite. As I've said, textbook anti-Semitism, Jewish lives don't matter, right? They have no value or have less value. That's where these people are. All right. So there's that. We're expecting an attack, a response from Iran any day now. Some of the best information says it'll be Monday. Hoping to publish this on Sunday, so we'll probably know the night that I, get this out. If I'm not able to publish till Monday, it may already have happened. But we're expecting an attack soon. Russian transport planes have been seen flying into Tehran, delivering, heavy munitions, probably, right? Delivering supplies for the Iranians to use. Nice people, these Russians. So those who have been out there defending Russia and, Putin's not so bad. He's fighting a Christian crusade against the LGBTQ community and delivering weapons to Iran to murder Israelis. Nice guy. Good thing there, huh? So that's there. There have been some protests in Israel calling for Bibi to resign. At the moment, since he's whacking terrorists, I can't imagine for the life of me why. He's also just demonstrated his own value in going to speak before Congress. I really can't imagine Benny Gantz or Yair Lapid delivering such a speech before Congress and having that kind of applause and what have you. It's just not, not something I can envision, right? This is something that Bibi does really well. So he's also been playing some political games. Yoav Gallant has been pushing the ceasefire, as I mentioned in the last episode, and Bibi has tried to replace him as defense minister, or at least there are rumors to that effect. To be clear, there are reports that he tried to replace Yoav Gallant with Israel Katz, who is someone more reliable for Bibi. Somebody who wants to lead Likud and therefore is playing Bibi's game, wants to lead in the future, right? So he's playing Bibi's game and kissing up to Bibi. But apparently, Israel Katz declined, if the rumors are true. So we'll find out if there's any substantiation on that. But in the meantime, it seems that Bibi is trying to create a cabinet that's a little more loyal to him. Meanwhile, Itamar Ben-Gvir and the far right, the nutters on that side of the spectrum, are trying to gain more control over Israeli policy in Gaza, and that's not going to happen. The last thing we need is the terrible PR from that, first of all, but also, these guys have enough they've been given enough keys to the castle. Let's just put it that way. The government has already made enough concessions to them. They don't need any more. So, and there's Ben-Gvir threatening to quit the coalition, for example, if Bibi were to sign a ceasefire deal. Look, if there's a ceasefire deal that would include Hezbollah and Hamas and would see the release of all of our hostages, that would be wonderful if we could get our people back. That's what we want. And if that's a move that that Bibi makes in consultation with the military, and they feel that they've done enough damage to Hezbollah and Hamas, it would be worth doing. But threatening to quit over that's not constructive. I wouldn't really expect Bibi Netanyahu to sign a ceasefire deal unless he really felt that he had won the conflict, that he'd really put things on a good footing. Because as the security prime minister, who's already compromised by October 7th, right? He's already had a failing. He's not going to want to fail again, right? Although, you have people in the American media trying to claim that Bibi's sabotaging negotiations by adding additional stipulations and that kind of thing. All these rumors fly. It's always our fault, right? Whenever things go wrong, it has to be Israel's fault. So people have to set the groundwork for that, so that when, Hamas declines the ceasefire, then, we can say, oh no, it wasn't that it was Hamas that declined. It was Bibi. Bibi is bad, horns on his head, sniveling, conniving troll, secret space lasers, the whole yard, always with the negative waves. God, people, bigotry is really, really stupid. It just is. I'm not saying Bibi is a saint. I'm not saying the guy walks on water. I'm not saying he's perfect in any way, shape, or form. I have criticized him before on this podcast. I have criticized his policies. I have criticized his leadership style. I have explained in depth, beyond even my own views, for the benefit of listeners, why Israelis, why the opposition opposes him. Like why people don't like him in Israel and why he's better liked over here, right? I've explained all of that. I want to be fair, all right? I'm just saying, polls continue to show that there'd be some kind of deadlock if elections happen now. And as I said, elections are going to be influenced by events. We'll see how the conflict goes. If Bibi is seen as resolving this effectively and having done a good job in prosecuting the war, then he may come out with enough support to win another term. If that is not the case, if people don't feel that way, then he may be done, right? So, that is there. The opposition to Bibi hasn't changed. More demonstrations against him this last week. Israel is a country with freedom of speech, right to assemble peaceably, so people can assemble and demand that the prime minister resign. Try to envision, just for a moment, a demonstration in Gaza against Hamas. Do you have that in mind? Are you getting a vision of that? Because I'm seeing people being beaten, murdered, and, machine guns being fired into the crowd and that sort of thing. Not the sort of thing I would expect to have a positive outcome, right? So there's that. So there we are. We'll see what the attack from Iran is. We'll see what happens. We've had some reports that terrorist groups are trying to recruit Arab criminal gangs, the organized crime among Israeli Arabs, to commit acts of terrorism in Israel. Don't know how far that's going to go. Organized crime can be violent, but they're businessmen, right? Like they're out to make money, and that would bring a lot of heat on them from Israeli security forces, like Itamar Ben-Gvir, who would love an excuse to crack down on them anyway. So it wouldn't be a very bright way to proceed. So just thought I'd mention that. That's been in the news, and that's a potential threat, right? So there we are. It's been a crazy couple of weeks, and my God, so many things have changed in the world, and just so much stuff happening. Trying to stay on top of it all and make sure you guys know all about it. It's a complicated task. I hopefully I'll get back on my game here and get you an episode every week and we'll be more on top of things here. So with that, I'll go to the break, and then I just have a couple of things in the international section. I kind of want to keep it short because this episode, my episodes keep running long, and I like doing in-depth analysis and giving you that kind of stuff. But, when they get to be 2 hours long, I don't know. I mean, are you guys bored? I hope you have better things to do than just to listen to me. But I also try to make sure you know all the things that are going on. And, if there are segments you don't like, you're welcome to fast forward and get to the part you do. So come back with the international news, and we'll talk a little bit about Venezuela and events going on there. Quick, around the world, and talking about some of the things that are going on in the world that people seem to have forgotten about in the news cycle. And then I'll wrap it up. If you're interested in history and life skills, go check out the Mensch-Kight Show on Spotify and on Apple, another podcast that I've created. This one a little bit more miscellaneous, talks about different life topics, history, talk about Guadalcanal, and also the birth of liberty, the process by which liberty became the dominant ideology in Anglo-American society, and how Western civilization has generally been more individualist and how it has developed these theories. So if you're interested, go check out the Mensch-Kight Show. The recent elections in Venezuela have been an utter disaster for the administration there, the regime, I should say, more accurately. Years ago, there was this guy, Hugo Chavez, who took over Venezuela, and, he was elected president, theoretically elected once, and then he rigged every election afterwards. So we don't know if Venezuelans actually wanted to keep him. There was a recall election, an attempt to remove him during his term. There were all kinds of things that happened. But he managed to, with his, colectivas, to stay in power, right? And to force his way into power. So, he started his socialist policies, nationalized the oil industry, just destroyed. Venezuela used to be one of the wealthiest countries in the Latin American world, in that area, in that region, and he just destroyed it. Utter disaster. People were starving. Years ago, people were going out and butchering horses and any farm animals that they could find to get food because people were so hungry. And we've all seen that picture that goes around of the shop owner before and after socialism, right? Well, Chavez eventually died and was succeeded by this guy, Nicolas Maduro, who's his successor. And Maduro has kept the same thing going, with the New York Times trying to claim, he's been, imposing brutal capitalism on the people. What a bunch of nonsense. Anyway, so they had this election. The opposition clearly won, right? They have exit polls that showed that they had like 2/3 of the vote. And then Maduro publishes results that suggest he got a majority. And they tried closing polling stations and, it's almost like they learned from someone, right? Close the polling stations, publish results that, are implausible, but, you're official and, claims of voter fraud are baseless. Yeah. Anyway, so, the opposition presidential candidate is Edmundo Gonzalez, and Gonzalez is handpicked by the main opposition leader, and that's Maria Corina Machado. Machado she's a really interesting character. She's gathered together all of these different opposition groups who oppose Maduro for many reasons, but generally want a freer society and more, free market policies and prosperity for the country. So they had this election, and now, they're conflicting results. Thankfully, a number of countries, starting with Javier Milei in Argentina, and many others have refused to accept the results and are cutting off diplomatic ties with Venezuela. So that's a good thing. Apparently, Cuba has sent some troops there to help suppress the protests, but there have been a lot of protests, and the protesters have been gaining momentum. Some army and police units disarmed and joined the protesters, and there's been that kind of thing happening. we have to keep the pressure on from outside of Venezuela, but hopefully the people of Venezuela can overthrow this regime and achieve their freedom. Venezuela could be a prosperous country again. Milei has shown the path, right? Javier Milei became president of Argentina. Inflation has dropped since he's implemented the few reforms he's been able to implement. Congress is just now working on, the Argentinian Congress is just now working on his tax reforms and such. But the reforms that he's made have caused inflation to decline. Rental prices have dropped since the rental market's been deregulated. It's created more supply, and all of a sudden there are places to rent because the government isn't controlling it, and rental prices have dropped. So there's been some huge 9% decline in the poverty rate in Argentina just since he took office, right? Because he's implemented these policies. It's huge, right? And it's not rocket science, right? We know that these government regulations are harmful to the economy. We know that removing them frees up the market and frees people to prosper. And that's exactly what's been happening. So maybe Venezuela can have that too. I just hope they keep the protests up and keep the pressure up, and that the Maduro regime is forced to quit. Unfortunately, Maduro has the support of Russia. He's friends with all the bad guys, all the wonderful people in the world, right? Like Vladimir Putin and the Iranian regime that they're friendly with. So he has a lot of help to suppress that. There have been reports of Wagner mercenaries being in Venezuela. Haven't verified that yet. We do know some Cuban police and paramilitary forces have been sent, but still looking for verification of the others. But they've been going out and attacking protesters and beating people up and murdering people. The pictures and the videos that we've been seeing out of there have not been pretty, but hopefully the pressure and the people protesting will do the job. So if that regime falls, it'll be another good riddance. It was beautiful seeing the protesters tear down the statues of Chavez and enhance the natural beauty of Venezuela. It really is a wonderful country. Recently you had Maduro rattling his saber about trying to take over Essequibo in the neighboring Guyana. It's like, come on, people. Anyway. Thankfully, we were able to force them to back down, a U.S. show of force, but we need to keep the pressure on. The State Department has said some of the right things. Our State Department, Anthony Blinken, saying, we don't support, these elections are not legit. We don't support this regime. We need that backed up by action, right? It's time to isolate Venezuela diplomatically and turn up the heat, turn up the pressure, right? All right, looking around the world, there are a couple of things I just have to mention. I know I'm running long, and this is taking a while, and I'm in an awkward place with family problems and what have you at the moment. But hopefully that will all sort itself out. So I want to wrap this up. But you look around the world, and there are a lot of things that just aren't being talked about. We had the Tuareg, who are a minority in Mali, often at odds with the government, launched a surprise night attack on what used to be Wagner mercenaries in Mali, right? Russian mercenaries. And they were able to capture them. And Ukraine is making a deal with them to extradite these guys so that they can face charges in Ukraine, which would be beautiful. But these Wagner mercenaries have been used in places like the Central African Republic, Mali, and other countries in the region to suppress the locals and prop up these regimes, these dictators there, and they've been brutal. So there's also the civil war in Sudan that's been forgotten about. Millions of people have been displaced. We don't even know what the death toll is. The death toll could be in the millions. So much carnage there, and it doesn't get any attention. I guess, black people don't really matter. Africa doesn't matter. Doesn't make the news cycle, but it is, an ongoing conflict there. And again, Wagner mercenaries helping out the bad guys in that. Now, there aren't many good guys in Sudan, but the legitimate government is, the junta, set up by the military there is still better than their opponents, who are again backed by Wagner and are associated with the Janjaweed, the militias that were committing genocide in Darfur not that many years ago. So another conflict going on. There's just so much, all over the world. There's chaos, growing chaos. We have riots and protests in Bangladesh over laws that restrict, there's a certain group of people who have hereditary jobs in the civil service in Bangladesh. There have been huge protests against that. Bangladesh is cutting off social media and they're trying to suppress the protests. And they've made some compromises with them, but, it's still not pretty, right? There's just a whole bunch of stuff going on around the world. So I'll get more in-depth in stuff in the future, talk more about European politics. We've got riots in the UK right now, and there were, two sides to that, right? There was someone who punched a police officer, a security officer at the airport, and because they were trying to search a woman for security purposes, and they claiming that modesty was the issue, they refused to let the female police officer search a female Muslim woman, and so that led to violence, and they punched the police officer. So the police officers, beat up the brothers, and so now you have all these people protesting and rioting among the Muslim community. They've insulted Islam and this kind of thing. You attack a police officer, I don't know what to tell you. I don't have much sympathy. Okay, they have a right to search people. It was a female officer. It's not like they were going to have a man search this lady. She just needed to go and be searched. Okay. Anyway. So they get that, and then we have a migrant go and murder, and a Muslim migrant go and murder 3 children in England, and people are angry about it, and so they're going out, and there's been some riots on that side opposing that. None of which would have happened if the government had had some kind of sane immigration policy for the last 20 years, but that's what happens when you ignore the will of the voters for a long time, and anyone who disagrees with the policy is racist. Whenever you have to prop up a policy with insults like that, it's probably not a good policy. All right, so those are some of the things going on around the world. I'll be back with another episode in the future that will be more in depth and hopefully, with fewer. This episode is brought to you by the word assassination. We had the assassination attempt on Trump, and we've whacked a bunch of terrorists. Israel has whacked a bunch of terrorists. So, we've seen. Terrible attack on a good guy, and the Israel's finally been able to catch up with some of the bad guys. So with that, I will go ahead and conclude. But I hope that you are all well, insiders, and that you're enjoying the show. I really want to get back on my game about it, and will certainly try. So with that, goodbye, Lihitrot.
Writers of the history, stand with me. Look into my eyes and see. People go away but never say goodbye. Someone stole the moon tonight, took my light. Everything is black and white. Who's the fool who told you boys don't cry? Hours and flowers. Life is no game for the cowards. Why? The time goes by. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never fantasy, ecstasy, everything is meant to be. We shall pass, but love will never die. Hours and flowers, life is no game for the cowards. Why the time goes away. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. October rain. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. Mensch-Kight אין מקום, אין אותי מיום ליום, כולם ילדים טובים אחד אחד. Bring them back home.